Hello and welcome to everyone who's here to our first SFM workshop of 2023. Yay! And I hope you're all looking forward to our amazing speaker today. All the way from San Francisco, very early in the morning, we are delighted to welcome Alison Murdock, founder and chief marketer of Trusted CMO. So before founding Trusted CMO, Alison was the CMO at FirstUp, SVP of marketing at Verto Analytics, and was the SVP of marketing and the 11th employee at 6 Sense. And today, she's here joining our community to talk about the fundamentals of early stage SaaS marketing. So throughout the workshop, Alison will provide us with some real world example of successful early stage marketing strategies. So our hopes for everyone today is that you'll walk away with an understanding of how to build a foundational marketing strategy for your business, who to hire, and why they are necessary. So to make sure that this workshop is as valuable for yourselves and Alison, please send through any questions that you have on the chat. There will be some times throughout the presentation that Alison will take in some questions, but do type them in and then we'll get to it. But as much as I'd like to talk, you're not here for me, and I would love to welcome to our virtual stage Alison Murdock. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm so pleased to be joining you all. Yes, it is quite early. I've had at least one cup of coffee, so that's probably a good thing. So I'll go ahead and just give a quick intro about why I'm giving this talk today. Jovi did a good job of explaining who I was, but I think it's important that you know the problem that I'm solving, because I think a number of you would probably relate to it. I started Trusted CMO in 2020, February, mind you. But the pandemic had very little effect on this business. It grew very quickly. And the problem I'm solving is helping early stage companies set that foundation of marketing. Because most founders, I don't know many founders that are marketers or salespeople. It's sort of a murky world for them. And it's something that once they get a bit of funding, they're asked to do, and they don't know what to do. And frankly, it's not super complicated if you plan accordingly and you realize that 90% of the work is actually tactical execution. You're well on your way. But today I'm going to cover sort of how you can build a framework for marketing, what you can do to build a team to help you execute, and then the kinds of things that you could do depending on the gifts that your company is bringing to the market. So I'll go right into it now, and I'll stop at a certain point for questions, and no question is too silly. This is we're just learning how to do foundational marketing here. So you can ask away. All right, so let me just make sure that I can change it. Oh, my screen is doing a little thing. There we go. Okay, overview and intros, done that. All right, so marketing your early stage company, this is actually a thing that's near and dear to my heart. It shouldn't be an afterthought. I've spent most of my career in startups, and by the time I got there, it was a show. Okay, I don't want to be, I don't want my comment to be deleted, but I think you know what I'm trying to say. Marketing hadn't been thought about. It was like, oh, we don't need marketing, or we're just going to wait for it to do it later, or, we don't have anybody, or, oh, hey, can you just call the press up, or do something, random things, from uninformed people, sorry to say, mostly founders. And so it was a very irritating place to be. And I thought, if I could do anything in my life, it's to educate people that starting with marketing from the get-go is actually a very good idea. It shouldn't be an afterthought. So, because there's so many things, and I'm not going to read through these bullet points because you know them, that are on this list that you have to do. And as a founder, even if you're not a marketer, you know how to do this stuff. You just need to do it. But you are resource poor and time constrained. So how do you do all of this? That's my next thing. So first of all, I highly recommend and encourage you, and will go to my grave saying this, is research is so important. You have to do your due diligence on your market, understand who your buyer is, study your competition. And one of the objectives here, and why you need to do all of this, is that you are going to need to find the one place and the one advantage that you have over everybody else. Some examples might be this. You may be in a world that is highly competitive. You may have one competitor that you think you can do better than they do in the market. And that may be true, but you're going to probably run up against them time and time again. So what are the wedges that you have in your arsenal that will set you apart? Or I have a client right now who's building a really amazing product for a go-to-market role. And, their biggest competition is spreadsheets. And I'm like, really? Don't you have other competitors? Yeah, they do, but they're not direct. It's spreadsheets, seriously. So, in that case, the buyer might be just like, spreadsheets are fine. We don't really need to get another platform. So everything that you do with your research everything you do in your research is establishing why you are different, why you are better, and how to talk about your product. So in the next slide, I put a bunch of questions together that I think are, thought starters or prompts that you can use while building your researching and building your marketing strategy and plan. I think a couple of the key ones are really studying your target market. In B2B specifically, it's very often that we have, and especially in a sales-led motion, we'll talk about that in a second, you have multiple buyers. You have somebody who's going to sign a check who really probably will never use the product in some cases. And you have a cluster of users that I would call influencers. Maybe they're low on the totem pole, but the job they do is so fundamental to the business that if they could do it faster and better, the business would benefit. So in that, you're talking about your messaging. Here's what we do this thing. And then you have to talk about and understand why what you're doing is better for that role. So why does it help the marketing person? How does it help sales? And these business buyers and influencers may not even be in the same department. They may be across the company, which is very beneficial if you plan to bring your product to this company and then have users expand internally, which will, of course, make you stickier and more profitable in the future. So the other thing that you want to study, and again, I still hear startups say this, and we all know you're not supposed to say, I don't have any competition, because that's like a rookie move. And nobody wants to say that, but people still do, believe it or not. You need to study your competition. Now, like I said in the example before, sometimes it is really a do nothing, like it's just easier if we don't handle this problem today. Or you have those direct, intense competitors, right? So you'll need to look at your whole market and look at even what I would call the indirect or ancillary competitors, people who are doing a little piece of what you're doing, and you can say they're not doing it well, but they're still in the market because they've already been there before you, and they've been marketing and saying they do what you do. So you need to understand their language, look at their websites, look at their press releases, watch some of their talks, look at who's on their, who's selling and what their backgrounds are. Just get a good lens of what they're doing. And probably, if you have the time, look at it at least once a month and see what's changed. And there's all sorts of systems out there that can monitor competitors, but at least once a quarter. I see, again, another rookie move is, oh yeah, we know the competitors, we're never going to look at that thing again. That's not right, because the minute they come out with the news and they do their press release and it hits the wires and your VCs are calling you going, wait a minute, how come you didn't know about this? You're flying blind. So it's really a good practice to keep on top of that. The other thing that I think is really important to think about in these questions are, what is standing in our way of going to market? In as you bring your product to market, it could be that your product isn't ready, or there's only one feature that people can use. So you're sort of selling essentially sort of a nice to have, or is it that your competition is just going to win? You haven't found the wedge yet. It's really important to be real with yourself as a startup. I see a lot of times that, because we pour our hearts and souls into our companies, is we get a little bit delusional about our capabilities. And so it's the one time that you want to be real with yourself and say, really, what are the risks here? Maybe even a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. I think I might have gotten the quadrant wrong, but anyway, hopefully you understand what I'm saying. Being delusional and saying we're the only ones is really not going to help you in the long run. And then finally, the other important thing to do is, and we'll show this in the next slide before we pause for questions, is establish business goals. Establish your KPIs or your OKRs, whatever you want to call it, your revenue goals, your product release goals, your marketing goals. Put those out there. Give yourself a year or whatever, usually a year of time to meet those goals. And that is a very helpful way to work backwards to figure out what do you need to do to effectively meet those goals. And it's a great thing to be that rigorous at the beginning, because when you have investors, if that's what you decide to do, they will ask you all of these questions. So I'm going to pause for a second and see if there's anything out that I can answer, or any examples I can give.
Hi, just so if anyone has any questions. O'Neill has a question, Alison. What systems would you recommend to help with monitoring the competition?
Gosh, I wish I could remember all their names. There's actually a couple of them, let's see, was it SimilarWeb is one where it's web traffic and insights. There's another one that's more of a platform for competitive intelligence called CRAN, which I really like. I probably will need to get back to you with a list because I cannot remember the name of the one that's like in my head, but I can describe generally what they do. And what's really helpful is to look at sort of like, I think SEMrush also has a product. Look at your competition's traffic and where their inbound website traffic is coming from. You can also monitor their keywords, through and sort of like what channels are working for them through those types of platforms. CRAN is more of it's probably better for a little bit later stage, but it's a good rubric to monitor competitive intelligence. The other thing, and even if you're later stage, my former company, 6 Sense, they actually do a really good job with keywords. And you can monitor competition, especially if you are in a really competitive market, and you can search for like your competitor, see how many people are looking up that competitor, looking at their capabilities. So I would say if you're early stage, start more with the SEO monitoring systems than the other ones that I mentioned. Hopefully that answers your question.
Perfect. Any other questions? I'm sure everyone's saving them for later, Alison. So.
Yes. Okay. Well, I will then continue. So after all of these questions you will have gone through, this is sort of a framework of how to build a plan. So on the left, you'll see 3 capabilities, and I'm going to talk about the team in a bit. But essentially, no matter what your growth motion is, so in our world, in marketing, we have essentially 3 opportunities. One is product-led growth, which you're probably familiar with, and I have some examples of that. Essentially, what I described earlier, where you have this buying committee and you have a user, and the user is able to share the product with other users in their company. That is somewhat product-led growth, or even users external to the company. So good examples of that are Figma, Slack, where if I'm designing something and I want Joey to see it, I can share my Figma screen with her, and then she wants to use Figma more, and now she signs up. So it's a sort of a viral motion. There's also a sales-led, which is typical enterprise sales. You have a couple of AEs or reps, maybe some SDRs, lower level people are setting appointments and prospecting, and you're taking them through a distinct sales cycle. Or you might have a hybrid, which is some products are available. You can sign up and do a free trial, for example, or, and that's one version of the product. But if you want to do more and you want to have more users from the get-go, you need to talk to a salesperson. So Figma actually has both. They're not just product-led growth. So if you go on their website, look at their pricing pages, that's going to tell you everything. In fact, note again to competitors, that's another good section to look at, is how are they pricing? And I think that was on my questions. The second group of, or second domain is product marketing. Product marketing is a very strategic role in an organization, but it's not the only marketing role. Product marketing is responsible for messaging, for articulating how the product works, the features, the benefits, and also a lot of times monitoring whether customers are adopting the product and coming up with strategies to drive adoption and stickiness. They work hand in hand with sales, so they do a lot of sales enablement. They also work hand in hand with customer success. It's a strategic role, but it's not. The reason why I say it's not the only role is sometimes companies make the mistake of only marketing their product over and over again. They don't talk about their vision. They don't bring to life their brand. And all of that is important, especially in a world like this where we're very visually driven. We're looking at Instagram, we're watching TikTok, we're watching YouTube. We want to get a feel for the company. And some of these things come up in buying cycles. I can't tell you the number of times when I've looked at win-loss analysis and had customers say, you won this deal because I didn't like the sales team from your competitor, or I didn't like their website, or the website wasn't clear, or the CEO seems like a real jerk. So it's actually a real thing. And when you're building your company and your marketing, you have to think about both the qualitative and the quantitative aspects that a potential prospect might judge you on. So that brings me to sort of the third leg of this is content. And content is inclusive of content and social media, and content actually has many formats. It can be video, it can be written, it can be podcasts, it can be partner driven, like a partner webinar, for example. And in your content, what you're going to want to do is talk about your point of view. Like, why are you here? What are some of the trends you care about? So essentially, just to go back to the columns in this plan, the reason I bucketed it into functions is that in your strategy, again, you're looking for how could you win? What are the things that what are the insights you have that lead you to believe that you have this wedge, that you could make a lot of noise about one thing that's just super broken in the market, or that the competitors are not doing. And that is part and parcel of your strategy. So in this example, I'm thinking of one company in particular that's in the healthcare space that I work with. They have a very distinct set of buyers, 1,200 of them. And every single one of those buyers has a business deal that it would expand this product into new markets. So basically they're being escorted through the market, but just 1,200 buyers really can make a decision to whether to work with them. So their strategy is, we are going to do everything we can to target and engage and woo these buyers, because these are the people that are going to make or break our business. That is a classic account-based marketing strategy. Most companies don't have the luxury of knowing that there are 100 or 1,200 buyers, because it's such a complex market, and maybe their product could be used by many people, which is good. But that is one particular strategy where it's like, if we just focus on these people who are highly likely to buy, we will get wins. We will, at the same time, get more prospects in our database, and we can serve them better with inbound marketing, meaning we have resources that they're going to come look at, or events they're going to go to. And we can also direct our outbound sales team with outbound marketing. So it could be email sequences, it could be assets for the sales team to share, to help them during the sales cycle and help them educate the buyer. That team member is often called, and in this world, we're very focused in marketing on revenue. It's not just t-shirts and trade shows. It's very specific around how much is marketing contributing to pipeline, monitoring the pipeline, and monitoring even things like sales efficiency. How can we make our sales team more efficient? So it's actually a pretty strategic role. The second, in product marketing, so the research you're doing is state of the market. Product marketing is often, competition oriented. So looking at how products stack up, our products versus their products, and what are the things that we do better, especially and differentiation is key. They often do something like what I referred to earlier, win-loss analysis. So if you lose a deal, why did you lose it? If you win it, why did you win it? That's super helpful for helping the sales team do a better job of articulating the product. This strategy, in one case, thinking about a different client of mine, they knew exactly who their buyer was and their pain. And they said, as we're building this product, we're going to probably have 200 to 300 potential beta customers. Now, not all of them agreed, but they have a pretty healthy list. Not surprising, these are their first prospects. So one of the things that they're measuring is, in their beta, how quickly can they get these customers using the product and giving them feedback? And that's what they're working on right now. That their KPIs are around, can they get onboarded in a day, and can they start using it within a day? So a lot of the tactics that we're looking at here are how-to videos, the right messaging to help them and encourage them to onboard properly. And then as a result, if it all goes well, they'll get a bunch of quotes and customer stories out of that, and this is a company who has not launched yet. And that will be a treasure trove for marketing, because then they launch with all this traction, or seemingly so. In the content, so in that content domain, an important thing to think about as you're building your plan is, what are the trends right now in your market? If you've understood your market, done your research, as we talked about before, there are going to be certain things that are talked about, or myths that exist that you can debunk. And so in your planning, what you'll want to do is do a bit of a brainstorm. What do we have the right to say? What can we talk about? What can we show? What other experts can partner with us? And in content, you'll want to plan specifically around a regular cadence. You can't just write one blog post and go, yeah, we're done with content marketing. Like, it is a beast in some ways, because you can't just stop. Just like social media, you can't just like do one post a year. I mean, some people do. I do on Facebook because I don't like the platform, but I might be on Instagram a few times, and I'm not going to stop because it's fun. I'm sharing stuff. I'm meeting new people or whatever. But same in business to business. You need to plan for cadence. You need to be regular about it. And in fact, you might also find that your buyers really need information, and you have an opportunity to build a community, which is it's a concept that's been around forever, but it's back in the world. Everybody's doing community now. So in order to build that strategy for your content, you'll need to really establish what your point of view is. And the point of view is, hey, this is the market today, and we think that things could work differently. And here's why it matters to you, buyer. So it does not happen overnight. You have to, and this is what I'm talking about with cadence, say it again and again in 12 different ways. Now, content is one of those things that people sort of delay to the end. They're like, oh, we get product marketing. We need this because we have a sales team. Or we get growth. But content, we don't have any writers. We don't have this, that, whatever. I think it's one of the most important things. And the reason why is that when you create it and when you repeat your message again and again, you are starting to build awareness for your brand, and you're starting to establish who you are in the market. There are a couple of CEOs that I think of with one of my clients that's more established, who's in the very, very crowded data space, and they're specifically serving data engineers. And this other CEO serves data analysts. And this guy is the most amazing writer. And he puts out a Substack weekly. And it's not really about the market. It's just that he's such an amazing writer. And he'll talk about like football stats or something. And then he'll come back at the end to talk about how that relates to data. And I mean, it's the kind of thing where he just did that on his own, but it's establishing sort of that they're a bit of an edgy company with a very strong point of view. So this will not happen overnight, but it's an important thing to think about. Now, I'm sure you're all wondering, like, oh my God, we have 3 people at our company. How could we possibly do any of this? And that's what I'm going to talk about now. But maybe I should pause for questions, because I've just been rattling off, and maybe you've got some related to those points.
No, anyone have any questions in the meantime?
Okay.
Okay, well, keep
All
going,
right.
Alison. They're very interested.
Okay, good. So the early stage marketing team, what I'm showing here is, since I'm not using builds and things like that, it's not going to come across quite in the way I might explain it, but I want to sort of give you options here. As you build your plan, somebody needs to own marketing. It doesn't necessarily have to be a marketer. If you planned well, you just sort of go and do. But better if you do hire ahead of, I would say ahead of marketing. Now, I've had the experience of being the only person on the ground for a while, and it really sucks. But I had the great fortune to have an amazing team of people doing different stuff like machine learning and data science around me who would be happy to help as I asked. So I think that if you're in a position in which you can only hire one person, what you want to do is hire somebody who really is going to work well in startup. My company also does recruiting, not in the way that you might think, but just specifically for marketing roles and mainly for these types of roles, the team roles, demand, product, content, not necessarily the VPs and the CMOs. And the reason why we started doing that is that often people would hire the wrong person thinking, wow, they worked at Salesforce or they worked at Google and they're going to be amazing. If you're a startup, look what kind of money those people have. A lot of money, and these heads of marketing, they're used to having other people do stuff for them. And I'm not saying that it can't work. I'm just saying that I've never really had the experience of it working very well. So you'll have to take a bit of a chance on that one person in this case that you would hire. And I am a big fan of people who hustle, who are proactive, who are like, don't really take no for an answer in certain situations where, like, oh, CEO or founder says, I want to write a blog post. And the head of marketing is like, I'm the worst writer. What do? Oh, they find a freelancer who's an amazing writer. Maybe it's their friend in college. They jump on Zoom, they record the interview with the CEO, and they turn it into a blog post. Done. Super easy. So you need somebody who's resourceful. If you have the funding to hire a team, the demand, product, and content roles are what I would call the power trio. So if you think about like great rock bands in the world, like Rush, these guys, Geddy Lee plays bass and sings at the same time, but amazing guitarist, and rest in peace, Neil Peart, drummer, amazing, right? So, but they're like, make a great sound, and there's only 3 of them. And the reason why that dynamic works is they do distinct things, but every single thing that they do, that's their main job, benefits the other role. So here's an example. Content marketing. These guys put out an amazing interview on YouTube with the CEO and a customer. Well, the first thing the demand team's going to do is grab that video, put it in the sales sequences so that sales teams can send that to prospects who maybe are wondering how somebody used the product. The product marketer also could take that and say, hey, here's a customer story. In fact, you, CEO, should ask this customer about the 3 things that they did with our product that helped them succeed, whatever. So they're all working together to create one asset that benefits all sorts of things. Now, when I talk about something like video or writing, there's a world of, and I've built my business upon small agencies, freelancers, consultants, might sound bad, but I say point solutions, meaning I'm not a designer, but I know a lot of good ones who can help us and make our plans happen, because we can't, as a small company, hire our own designer unless there's somebody in the company already who's very good at it. So you have to be open to, you don't want to be focused in your efforts in marketing, but you also have to realize that you can't do everything, and don't be too cheap about it. Like these consultants, there's a variety of different people, good, bad, cheap, expensive. That's your decision, but you can use outsourced resources to do more things. You just need to know what to do. One caution I will bring up, though, is amongst freelancers and consultants, one of the areas that people often have missteps is paid marketing. And it's not that paid marketing is bad. It's just a lot of money. And there are a lot of agencies out there that do it and just will take what's your budget, and they'll take your keywords and they'll take some assets and they'll just let it run. And you're talking $10,000 a month. So I would be very careful with paid and an experiment before you go whole hog into hiring an agency or somebody to do that and spend a lot of money that you will never see again to generate so-so leads. But nonetheless, one of the things that I heard in my career in startups is, and it was a compliment, and I want to share this with you. It's not just to say that I'm great, but really it was like, you made our company look so much bigger than it is. And that was because I had, at least one other person, but I used my network to create assets, create assets and market and promote the company in ways that wouldn't be possible with just one or two people. And that was the consultants. So with that, I'm going to talk about just quickly, and I might pause for questions if there are any, about what it looks like to grow. So this is sort of the typical seed, Series A, Series B. I don't focus on Series C because that's like a whole nother world and I work with those companies too, but for this purposes of this, it's not so foundational. So generally with seed below, these are some of the things that you really need to focus on. And this is, related to the research that I shared with you and those questions that I shared with you. By Series A, by the time you've received institutional funding from a venture capitalist, you got to have your stuff together. You really need to have reporting. You have to have some hires in the pipeline. You should be doing some digital marketing, paid or unpaid. You should be going out on the speaking circuit. Like the expectations are different. Largely, it depends on the type of company you have. And I'm speaking about B2B SaaS, but this is really, kind of the expectation. By Series B, you have more of a staff and you're ramping for growth. And growth is really after that. You've probably received another big injection of funding, and the expectations, again, for meeting goals and revenue marketing are quite high. I've been at companies all the way through these, and it's a scramble. And it's a lot of sales and marketing alignment. But if you sort of establish the plan and monitor what your priorities are throughout this process, starting from seed to Series B, you really can't go wrong. So I don't know if anyone has questions about this. Okay. Nope. Okay, continue. So I'm going to run, you guys will get this deck afterwards, but I'm going to run through a couple of short examples of that illustrate some of the tactical execution, the tactics that we put together when we built our plans. So one of the things that we talk a lot about is positioning. Positioning isn't necessarily messaging. Positioning is how your company stands in the market. So here, there's a lot of people who talk about positioning. There's a lot of experts out there, but this is sort of the framework for positioning, naming the problem, how is it shifting, how is your company the answer, kind of your key differentiators, and then how you're connecting your story, your product, services. And then the most important thing is actually rolling it out so that you don't have half the company saying one thing and half the company saying the other thing. That happens all the time. The other example I referred to before, and this is hat tip to Elena Verna, who is on LinkedIn. She works at Amplitude. She's probably one of the loudest voices in product-led growth. And I love her tone because it's very, not controversial exactly, but she just doesn't BS. And so I think she's a really good person to follow if you're interested in learning about product-led growth. But I showed this slide specifically because it explains how these things work together: marketing-led, product-led, sales-led, and why a hybrid go-to-market motion is really important for some companies. Largely depends on your product and the types of customers you have, but this might be interesting. I encourage you to follow her if you want to learn more. This is example of product messaging that we do with clients. So this is about a platform that company we were working with, and messaging sort of sits underneath positioning. Positioning is, here's who we are in the market and what the vision and our mission and what we're trying to do and the problem we're solving. Whereas this is very specific about the product functionality. And what we'll see here is pillars. So we, how do we improve the process for the buyer? How do we improve the way that people interact with the product? How do we, how does this platform benefit the buyer? So you kind of go deep into customers' perspectives on your product. So just an example, there's like thousands more where product marketing is concerned. And then just finally, this content marketing. So this is a pretty cool situation, and one that you guys might be familiar with, and something I would encourage you to consider if you have a company that generates data that you are the only one for which you're the only one that has this data. I'll be kind of drill into this one. I worked for this consumer, this company Verto, now their name is in there, and they were acquired. They're in a space called consumer insights. So big competitors like ComScore, those kind of like understanding how consumers use products or how they use technology. This specific company built a platform to measure how consumers did things with mobile and desktop and iPads and so forth. So some of the customers were big names in the industry. And the reason why we were able to acquire these customers, and this was a company based in Finland, okay, Helsinki, I went there 12 times, really cold, but awesome. And we were selling to US buyers. So how do we make a mark? Well, a lot of the data we were collecting, and this was all privacy compliant. These were people who opted into panels and opted into, showing or having their usage monitored for a time. So kind of like user testing meets interviews. We were able to see things like how moms who are 39 shop on Amazon cross device. So they look on their mobile phone. They're like, I love those shoes. They go, their kids go to sleep, and at midnight they're on their computer buying those shoes. So things like that were really helpful for companies to understand third-party data, essentially, in a good way. And so we were able to package up these insights to answer certain questions that were trending in the market. And as a result of this, we actually won like 5 net new accounts really quickly just because of this data. It showed up in their feeds. And we, from a PR standpoint, actually, I think they had like 18 hits before. And then by the end of the year, and after repeatedly publishing this research and guides based on our data that only we had something like almost 700 PR hits. And one of them was the Wall Street Journal, who really wanted to use our data and they would call us up and go, hey, do you have any data on something? So it was a very successful play, and it was because we had data no one else had. So when I talk about, thinking about your strategy and how you're going to win and the wedge you have, think about what you have that no one else has, and how can you leverage that to stand out. And that is the end. I'm happy to take any questions that you have about anything we've covered at this point, or we can give you time back.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Alison. We actually have a question from Art. What is your preferred paid marketing channel? Is it Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Google?
Yeah, so I use typically for B2B where we work, it's LinkedIn and Google. And they're like, and Google is probably the first one I would go to. And the reason why is I can test really quickly if messaging is resonating. It's pretty easy to use. It's just AdWords, and you don't have to spend a lot there. I also use LinkedIn, and I use it on campaigns only if we really know that these are like the targets that we want to convert. But I'll often boost posts just to sort of see how much traction we can get and how that affects traffic. So I don't depend on paid for my clients. I'm like, that's the last thing you should do. And we got to test everything else. I'm a much bigger fan of organic, only because that shows that people are like starting to learn your brand. If you pay for all of it, you're going to get a bunch of crap, and you still don't know if somebody's like thinks you're raising awareness in an appropriate way. So I use those two channels to experiment, and then once we're convinced that it's effective, then we'll pour a little bit more money into it. I will say also there's a couple of platforms, metadata.io and 6 Sense also does this. If you have the budget, that you can do ad plays on top of their platform. So you can simply say, hey, here are the 100 buyers we're focused on. You can deploy ads through those platforms. Metadata's I've used both in over time, and I liked metadata a lot because we actually did run some campaigns on Facebook and Instagram, and we're surprised to see that, and I think it's because of our buyer type, who is a female of a certain age, that we were able to reach those buyers in those channels. So what was really cool about metadata was that they could run campaigns on these social channels and then enrich the contacts. So we actually had them appropriate professional contacts that we could reach out to later.
Perfect. Tom is asking, if you only had 10 hours a week to undertake marketing activities for your pre-seed startup, how would you spend that time? Great question, Tom. Thanks.
That is an awesome question. So at pre-seed, without knowing exactly how mature your product is, I think I would focus first on product marketing. And I know I kind of said the opposite. But the reason why I would focus on product marketing is it touches every domain. If you're going to have a sales team, they really need product marketing. They need to be able to explain, what is this product? How does it work? So if you have 10 hours, I'd spend maybe 8 hours on that and 2 hours on really thinking about your positioning and your point of view and ways that you could stand out in the market. So, I just because I know you can't do everything, but those two are probably the most important.
Perfect. Anyone else have any other questions? I have a quick question for you, Alison. Yeah. You had talked about, content marketing and pushing all the branding out. Mm-hmm. One of the, issues I suppose I've seen is over pushing your marketing. How do you find that balance between, getting your brand out and getting your voice and your branding versus just spamming people? Because I'm sure we all get spammed at some point. So
yeah, and that's so I kind of mentioned cadence. I encourage everyone to think about what is it like to receive hundreds of emails, like, from in a B2C world or e-commerce world. There's, how many text messages can I get about a certain pair of pants or a brand? Like, sometimes I don't mind it, but that's like a very much a over promote thing. Now in B2B, that happens a lot. I see a lot on LinkedIn when companies waste real estate and people's time with a lot of self-congratulatory stuff, like, hey, we just had our kickoff and here's a bunch of pictures. Like, okay, it's great if that's what you're doing for recruiting and hiring, but like, no one really cares. Sorry, they just don't. And so you need to be a bit judicious about what you're publishing. And I don't think you really have to publish that much. In fact, when I'm working with early stage companies, they're like, oh, we really need it. We want to get a blog going. We want to be publishing on Medium. We just need to be out there. I'm like, publish once a week, because nobody's waiting for your blog. Sorry, they're not. It just, maybe later, but and be very careful about then how are you promoting it. So if you're writing something about, we have a product release and we're super excited, get a customer on there and make sure you target, if you're going to boost it, to people who would actually care about it, not to the entire world. So it's just being a little thoughtful of your audience and not wasting their time.
Thanks for that. Another question from Dieter. Sorry, Dieter, if I said that correctly. But it seems like many organic and paid channels are saturated and harder to track. Do we have experience with broader mass market media, example, radios for B2B products?
Yeah, I haven't done it in a while because my clients aren't really mature enough to do that, but I have done it before. And radio can be effective if it's like, well, here, I'm going to just speak for San Francisco. Like, I've seen a lot of companies doing radio spots on like a public radio, or, where there's topics being discussed, it's essentially like a sponsorship. The other thing to consider is, and it's not exactly radio, but podcasts. Like, you take any podcast that's sort of maybe aligned to your audience, you can do kind of placement there. I don't think you would expect to see a lot of direct conversions. That would be an awareness play. Billboards are another example. We have some good ones here and some absolutely terrible ones. You drive along Highway 101, you're like, really? Like, the text is this small. Some marketer was like, here's the slide we have, just put it up there. It looks terrible. So if, and then, by Robert, not to be so negative, there's actually one that I think is pretty cool. Here we have buses. You can put an ad on buses, and you can put an ad on these little banners that are like along the, not the highway, but like one of the main drags, Van Ness here. And I've seen that really work. Again, awareness play. And, effectively it works well if you're SaaStock, you're like, hey, we're coming to San Francisco and it's on these dates, and here's a very short code you can register. Or, hey, Dreamforce is here. Everybody wants to know when Dreamforce is in town so they can get out, because it's so crazy. But these are the kinds of things that work. You just have to really have, you have to be sure why you're doing it, and that you're okay to never see conversions from something like that.
Thank you. Yeah, I recall one of the best bus ads I've seen here, Alison, was, I think it was like a word puzzle that you had to solve. So I was like sitting there and I was like, it just gets your attention, and it got me looking into the company. So yeah, definitely a bit of interaction there is really cool.
Yeah, and I think why that works, and I've glossed over a few things, like you might have questions about events or PR. Like, there's a lot of clever things you can do, and it kind of goes back to my earlier recommendation about asking questions and thinking and really deriving insights. Is, if your company is like, I had a client, they're very smart, and they wanted to do a puzzle. Actually, I think it was like at a trade show to stand out, and it was a contest, and that's aligned with their brand. So again, it's not really about, I'm going to get 3 sales deals, but it's like that prospect that sales might be calling next week saw that ad and said, that's really cool. You guys are awesome. So it's this building a bit of sentiment around your brand that's important to do. And it's not a one-shot deal, but it's important. I don't know if we have time, but I'll share a really kind of a funny story. So when I was at 6 Sense, we had just started. I mean, there was like 2 of us in marketing, and we had our first show at Dreamforce. And when you back in the day, when you were a first time exhibitor at Dreamforce, you had the smallest booth, right? 10 by 10 feet in, because I don't know what it is in metrics, but metric system. Anyway, we were like, how are we going to stand out? We had a really funky logo, and that was kind of drew some attention. But we decided that what we would do is do a golf putting contest, and we would give people who got the golf ball into this janky little cup cash. So we had cash, like $10, and a little cup taped to the ground, and a putter. And by like that afternoon, the line was like 40 people deep, because we're just waving around this cash. And we got it, like, our co-exhibitors on the other side were so irritated with us, but it really got this tiny little company some aspect of notoriety at a show that takes over the entire city of San Francisco. So being clever and a little edgy is not a bad thing.
Perfect. So we shall see golf putting in SaaStock Austin then.
Yeah, there you go.
That's what we're seeing.
Yeah, maybe there's probably a lot of ideas. I grew up in Texas, so I have a lot of ideas for you.
Perfect. Well, if anyone else has any questions, now is your time. I'll give it a couple seconds. But while we're waiting, I will thank you so much, Alison, for your time, getting up very early and sharing all your experience and knowledge with the SFM community. We really appreciate it, and being the first one as well for 2023. So you're setting the bar very high. So,
well, thank you.
So if no one else has any questions, again, thank you everybody for joining and participating again at our first workshop for 2023. Just a quick reminder for everybody that the workshop is recorded, and this will be shared with the deck shortly after. So, however, if you have any questions for Alison post this event, do link up with her, do connect. I'm sure she'll really appreciate that.
Yep.
So as we close this workshop, just a quick reminder to everybody, and my lovely colleague Ben has reminded everybody that if you could please complete your 2022 surveys. We really want to bring the best SFM kind of community for you for 2023. So, we love to hear back from you. As Alison said, listen to your customers, listen to your members. It all brings it back. So as we close this workshop, I wish you all a lovely rest of the day. And I will see you all again in the next event in February. So keep an eye out for my messaging. But aside from that, have a good day and goodbye to all. See you next time.
Bye. Thank you.